When I married my husband, I knew I wasn't just marrying him, I was marrying into his family. Everyone says that, but I didn't really get it until his parents made sure I understood exactly where I stood in their hierarchy, firmly at the bottom. I grew up in a middle-class household. My parents weren't perfect, but they loved me. They taught me to work hard, to be kind, to show up for the people you care about. So, when I met Michael in college, I thought his family would be kind of the same. He was funny, grounded, ambitious. How could he have come from anything but supportive people? That illusion shattered the first Thanksgiving I spent with them. His mom cornered me in the kitchen, her smile tight. "So, when are you giving us grandbabies?" she asked, while rearranging the stuffing in a dish like it was life or death. I laughed nervously and said, "Well, we're not in a rush. We want to build our careers first." Her eyes narrowed. "Careers don't give you a legacy." It was the first of many comments that felt more like knives. What made it worse was that I couldn't have kids. I didn't find out until after Michael and I got married, after months of doctor appointments and tests. I remember sitting in that sterile office, the doctor's words echoing like a death sentence. "Your chances are less than 5%. Michael squeezed my hand, told me it didn't change a thing, that we'd figure out other ways to build a family if we wanted to. But his parents? They saw it as proof that I'd failed my purpose. The day we told them, his mom gasped like I'd confessed to murder. His dad leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, eyes cold. And then he said it, "You deserve a real wife, not damaged goods." I'll never forget how quiet the room got. Michael stood up so fast his chair nearly toppled. "Don't you ever talk about her like that again," he snapped. His mom started crying, his dad scoffed, and I sat there, cheeks burning, wishing I could shrink into the floor. From that moment on, I wasn't their daughter-in-law. I was the obstacle standing between them and their perfect family photo. It only got worse. When Michael's brother, Ryan, and his wife had their first baby, his parents threw them a huge shower. They plastered photos of the baby all over Facebook, Instagram, even sent out cards like it was royalty being born. Every caption read, "So proud of our expanding family." Every post was about the legacy. At dinners, they'd introduce me with a laugh. "This is Michael's wife, the one who can't give us a legacy." They thought they were being witty. Everyone else just looked at me awkwardly, like they wanted to crawl under the table. Michael would argue, tell them to stop, but they'd shrug it off. "We're just joking." It wasn't a joke. It was a slow, steady attempt to erase me. The house thing was the real slap in the face. Michael and I were renting a place his parents owned. It wasn't glamorous, but it was affordable, and it let us save while we built our careers. Then, out of nowhere, his parents called and said, "We're giving the house to Ryan. You'll need to find somewhere cheaper." No warning, no discussion, just eviction masked as generosity to the better son. We scrambled to pack, move, and find somewhere we could actually afford. When I asked why they do that to us, his mom said, "Ryan has a family. You'll manage." Like we weren't one. I tried to keep my head up. I suggested adoption one night, sitting on our new apartment floor surrounded by unpacked boxes. I thought maybe that would shut down the legacy talk. But when Michael brought it up at dinner, his mom sneered. "Why waste money on someone else's mistake?" Her words punched me in the gut. Mistake. She was talking about children as if they were defective products. I had to excuse myself to the bathroom, where I cried silently until my eyes were raw. Then came my promotion. I'd been working my ass off at my firm, late nights, missed weekends, pouring everything into my job. When I finally got promoted, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could hold my head high again. At dinner, I shared the news, hoping for at least a crumb of acknowledgement. His dad smirked and said, "Pity hire." His mom nodded like it was fact. Michael's jaw tightened. He told them off again, but it was like shouting into a void. They didn't care. To them, I was always going to be less than. The only reason I survived all of it was because Michael never wavered. Every time they insulted me, he stood up for me. Every time they pushed, he pushed back harder. He never once made me feel like I was the problem. But they used that against him too. His mom once whispered, thinking I couldn't hear, "He's throwing his life away for her." I wanted to break. I wanted to give him an out to say, "Maybe you should go where you're wanted." But he never let me. He'd hold me after every family dinner, kiss my forehead, and remind me, They don't get to define us. We do. Still, the cracks kept forming. By the time Ryan's second kid was born, I was barely hanging on. Every family gathering was a fresh wound, every whisper another cut. They flaunted their expanding family while mocking me as though I were an embarrassing footnote in Michael's life. What they didn't know was that life has a way of flipping the script. And 1 year later, I'd be sitting in a courtroom, watching those same people who called me damaged, a mistake, a pity hire on their knees, screaming, "Please don't cut us out." But that's a story for later. After the house incident, something in me shifted. It wasn't just the insult anymore, or the digs about not being able to have kids. It was the realization that they weren't just cruel in passing, they were strategic. Every move was calculated to remind me I was disposable, replaceable, unnecessary. Michael and I started pulling back from family events. It wasn't some dramatic, "we're cutting you off" conversation. It was more like exhaustion. Declining dinners, skipping birthdays, quietly removing ourselves from their constant spotlight on Ryan and his perfect little family. But you know how toxic people operate. The less control they have, the harder they claw. The first real blow-up came during Christmas at his parents' place. We'd already decided to leave early. Michael had work, and I'd been dreading it since Thanksgiving. But when we walked in, it was like walking into a shrine. Every wall was plastered with framed photos of Ryan, his wife, and their 2 kids. Stockings embroidered with their names hung neatly on the fireplace. There wasn't a single photo of Michael or me. Not one. We brought gifts for everyone, carefully chosen, thoughtful things. His parents opened them, nodded, and set them aside like junk mail. Then Ryan handed over some framed baby pictures, and suddenly it was a tear fest. "Our beautiful legacy," his mom sobbed, clutching the frame like it was sacred scripture. Later, when everyone was gathered around the table, his dad raised a glass. "To family," he said. "And to carrying on the name." His eyes flicked to me, sharp as glass. "Some of us understand the responsibility." Michael slammed his glass down so hard the table rattled. "You're unbelievable." His mom tried to laugh it off, waving her hand. "Oh, stop, we're just having fun." "Fun?" Michael snapped. "You think humiliating my wife is fun? You think reminding her of something she can't control makes you good parents? You've never once treated her like family. Never once supported us. But Ryan breathes, and you act like he's a god." The room went silent. His mom's face crumpled into fake tears. Ryan looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. His dad scowled. "You're too sensitive. She's the one who brought baggage into this family. We're just honest about it." That was the first time I saw Michael stand up from the table, grab his coat, and say, "We're done here." We left before dessert. In the car, I was shaking so hard I couldn't even hold his hand. But even after that, they didn't back off. If anything, they doubled down. 2 months later, Michael got a call from his mom. She said Ryan and his wife were looking to buy a bigger house, and his parents wanted to help with the down payment. Which, fine. Their money, their choice. But then she said, "We'll need you to co-sign since your brother's credit isn't as strong." Michael actually laughed. "You've got to be kidding me. You evicted us to give him our house, and now you want me to help him buy another." "You're being selfish," she hissed. "Family helps family." "Funny," he said. "I don't remember you selling your stuff when we were struggling." She hung up on him. That night, I asked Michael if he ever regretted marrying me. I don't even know why I asked. It just spilled out, raw and ugly. He looked at me like I'd just spoken another language. "Regret?" he said. "I regret them. I regret letting them treat you like this for so long. But you? You're the only thing I've ever been sure about." I cried harder than I had in years. Around that same time, my career really started picking up. My promotion meant bigger responsibilities, higher stakes, and honestly, more recognition than I'd ever had in my life. I was presenting at conferences, getting quoted in articles. For the first time, I felt like I had something no one could diminish. But of course, his parents found a way. At Easter, when Michael and I actually caved to attend, his dad made sure to drop it in conversation. "Saw your little article in the paper. Nice pity hire." Companies love to parade women around these days. Makes them look modern. Everyone laughed. Everyone except Michael and me. I wanted to scream, but instead I just clenched my jaw until it hurt. After that night, I made a choice. I wasn't going to beg for their acceptance anymore. I wasn't going to cry in bathrooms or wonder why I wasn't good enough. I had worked too hard, survived too much, to let their bitterness define me. Michael agreed. "We're done," he said. "No more dinners. No more holidays. If they want to see us, they can show up in therapy first." We started therapy ourselves, not because our marriage was breaking, but because we wanted to make sure we didn't break under their constant weight. Those sessions gave me language for things I hadn't been able to put words to: emotional abuse, scapegoating, enmeshment. It was liberating and horrifying at the same time. Meanwhile, his parents kept spinning their narrative. To anyone who would listen, they painted me as the cold, selfish wife who kept Michael from his family. They posted endless photos of Ryan and his kids, with captions like, "So lucky to have children who know the value of family." Little digs aimed at us, dressed up as wholesome content. But what they didn't know was that life has a funny way of circling back. The same people who spent years belittling me for not being enough were about to find themselves standing in front of me, begging for mercy. And I won't lie, when that day came, it was every bit as surreal as it sounds. Cutting them off wasn't dramatic at first. There wasn't some big confrontation, no screaming match that ended with slammed doors. Michael and I just stopped showing up, stopped answering their calls right away, stopped pretending we didn't notice the way every interaction left us gutted. At first, I thought maybe they'd let it fade, that they'd focus on Ryan, their golden child, and leave us alone. But narcissistic people don't just let go. They need an audience, and when you walk away, they get louder. They started showing up unannounced. Once, his mom rang our doorbell holding a bag of baby clothes, just in case you change your mind about adoption. When I didn't open the door, she left them on the porch. Another time, his dad parked across the street for 2 hours, just sat there like he was keeping watch. Michael finally told them, "Stop showing up. If you want to talk, call us like normal people." His mom gasped like he'd cursed her out. "You're abandoning your family," she cried. "No," he said. "We're setting boundaries." But boundaries meant nothing to them. Then came the financial stuff. Ryan's new house, yeah, the one they wanted Michael to co-sign for, turned into a money pit. Repairs, upgrades, debt stacking up. His parents had already funneled most of their savings into helping him. Then his business started failing. And instead of letting him deal with the consequences, they looked straight at Michael. One Sunday, Michael got a call from his dad. "We need $50,000. Just like that. No preamble, no shame. Michael laughed bitterly. "You need? You mean Ryan needs." His dad's voice hardened. "You're doing well. He meant me, just got promoted. You can afford it. Family comes first." Michael told him no. His dad exploded. Called him selfish, ungrateful, said we had forgotten where we came from. Michael hung up. That night, I looked at him and asked, what if they don't stop? What if they just keep taking and taking until there's nothing left? He rubbed his face and sighed. Then we fight back. I didn't know what that meant yet. The breaking point came a few months later. Michael's mom called me at work, which she never did. Her voice was syrupy, fake sweet. "We're planning a family reunion this summer. Everyone will be there. It's time to mend fences." I asked, "Will you introduce me as the wife who can't give us a legacy again, or do I get a promotion to the pity hire?" Dead silence. Then she snapped, "You've always been difficult." I hung up. A week later, we got a certified letter. His parents were suing us. Not for money, not exactly, but for a breach of family agreement. They claimed Michael had promised to share in family obligations, including financial support for his brother. It was absurd, legally flimsy, but they were serious. They wanted a court to force Michael to bankroll Ryan's life. I sat there staring at the papers, my hands shaking. "They're trying to bleed us dry," I whispered. Michael's jaw clenched. "Then they're about to learn what happens when you push too far." We hired a lawyer. At first, I thought it was just about defending ourselves, but our lawyer dug deeper. And what came out wasn't just absurd, it was ugly. His parents had been moving money around in Ryan's name, hiding debts, even trying to put part of our old rent payments under family contributions. It wasn't just petty anymore. It was fraud. Michael and I sat in our lawyer's office stunned. "You can countersue," the lawyer said calmly. "You have more than enough evidence. If you want to cut them out completely, this is your shot." I looked at Michael, half expecting hesitation. But his face was stone. "Do it." And that's how we ended up in court. Walking into that courtroom the first day was surreal. His parents sat at the plaintiff's table, dressed like they were auditioning for some Hallmark family drama. Ryan sat behind them, avoiding our eyes. His mom gave me a once-over, like I'd tracked mud across her carpet. When the judge asked for opening statements, their lawyer spun this sob story about family obligation, about how Michael had turned his back on the values he was raised with. They painted me as the manipulative outsider who'd poisoned him against his blood. When it was our turn, our lawyer stood and calmly laid out the evidence: the fraudulent transfers, the misuse of funds, the manipulative agreements they'd tried to pass off as binding. With every document flashed on the screen, his parents' faces fell a little more. Michael squeezed my hand under the table. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. It was weeks of hearings, filings, testimony. Weeks of sitting in that room while his parents glared at me like I'd ruined their lives. Weeks of listening to them spin lies about how ungrateful we were, how much they'd sacrificed. Weeks of their lawyer calling me damaged in thinly veiled ways, like it was still open season on my infertility. But when it was finally over, when the judge ruled in our favor, not just dismissing their claim, but granting our countersuit, I felt something crack open inside me. Relief. Justice. Power. His parents went white. Ryan buried his face in his hands. And his mom, the same woman who once sneered that only someone desperate would love me, fell to her knees in the courtroom aisle, screaming, "Please, don't cut us out." The bailiff had to escort her out. And for the first time since I married into that family, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like damaged goods. I felt free. The day the judge ruled in our favor, I swear the air felt lighter. Like someone had cut the cord that had been strangling us for years. I'd expected to feel triumphant, like I'd want to throw my arms in the air and yell. But instead, I just sat there in silence, numb. Michael squeezed my hand, and all I could manage was a shaky exhale. On the way out of the courthouse, his mom's cries echoed down the hallway. She'd thrown herself at us as we passed, clutching at Michael's sleeve like some tragic actress. "We're your parents. How could you do this to us?" Her mascara was running, streaks of black cutting through her carefully painted face. His dad stood stiffly behind her, jaw clenched, eyes darting like he was trying to find an escape route. Ryan just stared at the floor. Michael didn't stop walking. He didn't even look at them. I followed his lead. For once, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel like I owed them an explanation. I just walked out of that courthouse into the sunlight, my spine straighter than it had been in years. The silence afterward was almost eerie. No more unannounced visits, no more guilt-tripping voicemails, no more Facebook digs about family legacy. It was like we'd been living next to a train track for years and suddenly, the trains just stopped. I didn't realize how much background noise they'd been until it was gone. At first, I didn't know what to do with the peace. I'd wake up waiting for the next shoe to drop, waiting for another attack. But weeks passed, then months, and slowly, I learned how to live without bracing myself all the time. Michael dove headfirst into his work, and for the first time, he wasn't working with a chip on his shoulder. He wasn't chasing approval that was never coming. He was just thriving. He started mentoring younger employees, taking risks he'd been too weighed down to attempt before. Watching him bloom without their shadow over him was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. As for me, I leaned into my promotion. I stopped second-guessing whether I'd been given opportunities out of pity. I knew I deserved to be there. Every late night, every missed weekend, every ounce of effort, I had earned it. I started saying yes to panels, yes to leadership opportunities, yes to things I would have talked myself out of before. And us? Our marriage got stronger. Therapy had already given us a foundation, but cutting out the toxicity gave us room to breathe. We cooked together, traveled when we could, even started talking seriously about adoption again. But this time, it wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It wasn't about shutting his parents up or trying to fit their mold. It was about us, about the family we wanted to build on our terms. Meanwhile, word about the court case spread through the extended family like wildfire. His parents tried to spin it, of course. They told anyone who would listen that Michael had betrayed them, that I'd manipulated him into cutting them out. But paperwork doesn't lie. Once people saw the evidence, the fraudulent transfers, the blatant favoritism, the story shifted. Relatives who'd always kept their distance started reaching out quietly. Cousins messaged Michael things like, "I always thought they treated you unfairly, but I didn't realize how bad it was." An aunt called me one night, crying, saying she'd heard what his mom said about me not being a real wife and that it made her sick. Apparently, his parents' reputation in the family wasn't the spotless legacy they thought it was. Ryan, though. Ryan didn't say a word. Not a text, not an apology, nothing. From what we heard, his business eventually collapsed. The house his parents had sacrificed so much to help him buy went into foreclosure. They'd poured everything into him, and when it all fell apart, they had nothing left to show for it. I'd like to say I felt satisfaction watching that unfold, but mostly, I just felt tired. They'd wasted so much of their lives chasing a fantasy of the perfect legacy that they destroyed the family they actually had. And for what? Some illusion of control? A couple of grandkids they could parade around like trophies? Michael struggled more with the aftermath than I did. He'd cut them off, but there were days I could see the grief in his eyes. Not grief for who they were, but grief for who they should have been. "I didn't need perfect parents," he told me once, staring at the ceiling in bed. "I just needed them to love us both. That's all." I kissed his shoulder and whispered, "They couldn't. But you can break that cycle." "We can." And that became our focus, building something different. Building a home where no one had to earn love like currency. Where our worth wasn't tied to what we could produce. Where family meant safety, not performance. The irony was, after everything, I finally did start to feel like part of a legacy. Not the kind his parents worshipped, the kind plastered on Facebook walls and toasted at dinner tables, but the kind that's built quietly, day by day, in the way you choose to love people. The last time we saw his parents was by accident. We were at the grocery store, in the frozen aisle. His mom spotted us before we spotted her. She walked over, eyes wide, voice trembling. "Michael," she whispered, like saying his name might undo everything. "Please, just talk to us." Michael didn't even hesitate. "We're done." He turned the cart and walked away. I looked back once. She was standing there between the frozen peas and the ice cream, tears streaming down her face. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel like damaged goods. I just felt free. But freedom has a weight too. Because once you cut out the toxicity, you're left staring at the scars. And deciding what kind of life you'll build with the space you fought so hard to claim. It's been a couple of years since that courtroom moment, since his parents dropped to their knees screaming for us not to cut them out. Sometimes it still feels like a fever dream, like maybe I imagined the whole thing. But then I remember the silence, the blissful, weightless silence that came after, and I know it was real. People always assume that after you cut off toxic family, life suddenly becomes perfect. It doesn't. There's grief involved, even when you know it was the right choice. Michael went through waves of it, anger one week, numbness the next, sometimes even guilt. I had my own moments too, mostly when I saw happy grandparents playing with their grandkids at parks. A little voice would whisper, "That should have been different. That could have been us if they'd chosen love instead of cruelty." But then I'd remind myself, they made their choice, and so did we. Michael and I leaned hard into therapy during that first year. We didn't want their ghosts haunting our marriage. We wanted to break the cycle completely, to unlearn all the warped definitions of family they'd shoved down our throats. Our therapist asked us, "What does family mean to you, without their influence?" At first, we didn't know how to answer. But over time, we built our own definition. Family is the people who show up for you, without conditions. That definition carried us when we finally circled back to adoption. This time, it wasn't about silencing his parents or proving anything. It was about us wanting to love a child, period. The process was long, invasive, sometimes overwhelming. There were days we questioned if we could handle it. But every time we hit a wall, we reminded each other, we've survived worse. When we finally got the call about a little girl who needed placement, I swear I couldn't breathe. The social worker said her name, her age, her story. She said, "Would you like to meet her?" Michael squeezed my hand and whispered, yes. Meeting her was nothing like the movies. There wasn't a slow-motion hug or instant connection. She was shy, guarded, clutching a stuffed rabbit like her life depended on it. I saw so much of myself in her, the way she kept her eyes down, waiting for rejection. My heart broke and swelled all at once. It took time. Months of building trust, of proving we weren't going anywhere. The first night she called me Mom, I cried so hard Michael had to hold me up. The first time she ran into Michael's arms when he came home from work, I knew we were doing it right. We weren't a perfect family, but we were a real one. And that's what his parents never understood. Family isn't about bloodlines or legacies you brag about on Facebook. It's about the day in, day out work of loving someone exactly as they are. As for his parents, we haven't spoken to them since that grocery store run-in. Every so often, someone from the extended family will mention them, usually about how bitter they've become, how they complain that Michael stole their grandchild by adopting. They post about Ryan's kids less now. I don't know if that's because of embarrassment or just sheer exhaustion. Ryan reached out once, about a year ago. He sent Michael a short message. "I'm sorry for how things went down." No excuses, no explanations, just that. Michael didn't respond. Not because he didn't care, but because sometimes the wound is too deep to stitch back together with one sentence. Do I forgive them? That's complicated. Some days, I think I do. Not for their sake, but for mine. Carrying hate feels like dragging a weight around, and I've carried enough of those already. Other days, I feel the sting of their words, damaged goods, pity higher, not a real wife, and forgiveness feels impossible. Maybe the truth is, it doesn't matter. I don't need to forgive them to be free of them. The real healing came not in forgiving, but in building something better. Last Christmas, Michael and I hosted our own dinner. Just us, our daughter, a couple of close friends who've become chosen family. We cooked too much food, spilled wine on the tablecloth, laughed until our sides hurt. When our daughter asked if she could hang her handmade ornament on the tree, I lifted her up and said, "Anywhere you want, baby." In that moment, I realized, this is my legacy. Not the one his parents obsessed over, not the picture-perfect lie they chased, but this messy, loud, imperfect joy. When I tuck our daughter in at night, I think back to all the times his parents told me I wasn't enough, that I was broken, that I didn't deserve a family. And I smile, because here I am. A mom. A wife. A woman who fought through hell and came out stronger. Michael once told me, "You're the bravest person I know." I didn't believe him at the time. But now, I think maybe he was right. It takes bravery to stand up to people who've held power over your whole life. It takes bravery to choose your own path, even when it means walking away from blood. And it takes bravery to build love from the ground up when everyone told you it wasn't possible. The court case didn't just cut his parents out of our lives, it cut the last string tethering us to their definition of who we should be. It gave us permission to write our own story. And in our story, I'm not damaged goods. I'm not a mistake. I'm not difficult. I'm a mother. I'm a partner. I'm whole. And I finally feel free.